Welcome to ThinkTech Talks here on the 3 to 4 block on a given Wednesday. We're delighted to have Evan Weber with us. He's with U.S. Climate Plan, did I get that right? .org. He joins us by Skype from Washington, D.C., where all the climate plan planners live, I think. We have a few here, but it's not the same thing. Welcome to the show, Evan.
Hi, Jay. Glad to be here.
So you guys at usclimateplan.org, a nonprofit in Washington, which is, dedicated to talking about and taking steps to ameliorate climate change. You guys wrote a report recently, and I'd like to know about that report. What are your conclusions, and are they remarkable, or are they what we've heard before?
Sure. We came out with a report recently, just in October, and it's called The Plan, How the U.S. Can Help Stabilize the Climate and Create a Clean Energy Future. And it has two components, really. First, we look at the current state of U.S. climate and energy policy, and take a look at where we're at and contrast that with where the world's best climate scientists say we need to be in terms of our goals of reducing emissions to levels that will ensure a safe and livable planet in the future. And from there, we look at what the state of play is with that and sort of what President Obama has proposed as policy actions. And we show how he can go further, both within his own executive authority and things that he can call on Congress for legislative action to get us to where we need to be.
Oh, okay. Well, planning is good, but we need to know the exact details of that. So can you give us at least some examples of what you're telling the president to do? Sure.
So we've broken it down into a sort of 6-point plan. The first bit is going beyond what he's laid forward, going beyond certain risky technologies that we feel that his plan relies too heavily on, such as natural gas extracted through hydraulic fracturing.
Are you saying that you don't like natural gas?
I'm not saying I don't like natural gas. I think that the president is relying on it too much as a sort of climate inertia, as this bridge fuel to a clean energy future, when in fact it has a lot of climate and other environmental risks inherent in it.
Okay.
So relying too much on risky technologies, not being visionary enough in what can be achieved in transportation, and not doing enough to control our impact on emissions that we are exporting to other countries through fossil fuel exports. Then from there, we lay out some additional policy areas that we think the president should be calling on. So one is a fee on greenhouse gas emissions from energy sources that would level the playing field for clean, renewable energy and be able to reduce our dependence and use of fossil fuels.
Is that like a carbon tax?
Yeah, basically a carbon tax. But that also targets other, not just carbon dioxide, but methane emissions from energy sources as well.
Like from fracking?
Yes, we think that's important. So on top of that, a slew of other ways to restructure our energy incentives. One thing that's a little bit controversial that we push for is removing the corn ethanol requirement from the renewable fuel standards. We don't think that it provides enough benefit for its environmental and economic costs.
A lot of people feel that way, actually, Evan.
Yeah, just on very confusing and different sides of different aisles. There's been a quite interesting alliances that have formed around opposing the renewable fuel standards or for corn ethanol.
Yes.
But yeah, other than that, restructuring nuclear energy incentives, not providing new ones, removing fossil fuel subsidies, and pushing for countries in the international community to remove their fossil fuel subsidies, providing incentives for biosequestration, which can actually do a lot to help us meet our emissions reduction goals, things of that nature.
Can I just jump back for a minute? I didn't get the full flavor of what you were saying about nuclear. I took from what you said that you're not infatuated with nuclear energy.
Our plan basically doesn't provide any new incentives for nuclear energy. We think that the current incentive structure underplays the risks in that it incentivizes the amount of insurance that's provided to the nuclear industry, and it also the subsidies that are in place we think are fine. But the state of play with nuclear energy right now, it's only increased in cost over its lifetime. It takes a long time to get nuclear projects online, and we believe with the emissions reductions that scientists at IPCC and in other places say that we need to achieve in very short periods amount of time, nuclear is not the best option for us at this point. Whether technology develops in the future that will make nuclear a safer, more economically efficient, and more attractive option, that may be the case. But at this point in time, it does have its risks. It's not something that is this cheap fuel that it was once billed to be, and it takes quite a while to come online.
So, although it's called U.S. Climate Plan, it's really about energy. I guess there's a direct connection there. If you want to solve the climate change problem, then you have to solve the energy problem.
Yes.
But you guys are focusing pretty much entirely on energy in this report, eh?
Yeah. So we are focused on energy. That's it. That's a good point. Our initiative was sort of born out of a realization that our nation does not have a comprehensive energy strategy, and despite years of political posturing, has failed to come up with anything that's visionary and is pointing us in a direction with any sorts of energy goals. And we viewed climate change as one of the most important things that it would be a good idea to have an energy strategy for. But there are a number of other reasons to really think about building a comprehensive energy strategy.
You know, I'm looking at this from the point of view of, seeing it unfold as it does, or as it might do in Hawaii. And we have a similar problem on the state level for sure here.
Yeah.
But it strikes me that there you are saying that there's no plan and that you'd like to step right up and make a plan, which is commendable actually in many ways. But it gives me a little concern that in the federal government, which has a lot of money despite the cliff, there's no agency. Is it true? There's no agency charged with making a plan, and thus there is no plan? Is it true?
Well, I hate to say it, Jay, but the current state of play is that we really don't have one. Up until June, when President Obama released his climate action plan at Georgetown University, there was really nothing in terms of figuring out how we were going to, as a country, move in any sort of concerted direction to deal with climate change. The last sort of legislative initiatives that were passed dealing with energy were in the Bush administration. The big ones were Energy Policy Acts of 2005 and 2007. They put a lot of things on the table. Some of those were good, some of them were bad, depending on how you look at it. But in terms of actually coming up with a strategy of all these things that we've been talking about for years and years, reducing our dependence on foreign oil, combating human-caused climate change, American energy independence, energy efficiency, all of these things, no one on a federal level, we have not come up with a comprehensive strategy yet.
Well, you know what? I mean, it's just, I like to ask you a question that goes one step beyond that, and that is why? Why, what forces, what vectors, what influences or vacuums are in place in this very smart country of ours, loaded with great schools and centers of learning and policy? Why don't we have a plan? What happened to create this huge gap at a time when we should be worried sick over it, at a time when Sandy, cuts across New York State, at a time when it's obvious that we're, in potential catastrophe over the issue, and there's no plan? What is it about government that has left this vacuum?
Sure. Well, first, I'd like to echo what you said is it's not for lack of American ingenuity. We have plenty of that. There are a lot of amazing people out there which have incredible ideas, incredible technologies that are coming to the play every day. Incredible energy promise. It is not for lack of ingenuity. The way I see it, it really comes down to a few things. The biggest, in my opinion, has to do with the vested interests. And for a long, long time in this country, we have been dependent on cheap fossil fuels. And fossil fuels really came to be in America. We had the energy boom in a lot of ways, and many of the existing energy giants out there in the world today, the biggest companies in the world, really owe a lot to our country to getting them to where they are. But they are the biggest companies in the world, and they have a lot of sway in our political process, and they donate and contribute so much money to keep things the way that they are, either directly by contributing to get people who support their interests into office, or by building think tanks and these astroturf fake grassroots campaigns to around supporting their interests. And it is really quite frightening what having enough money can do, even when there are people in our country with great ideas of how to move forward.
You probably don't like the Citizens United case either.
That hasn't done a lot of good strategy.
Well, this is such an interesting question, and it pervades not only energy but so many other things. It just happens to be that energy is the most immediate, most threatening, in my opinion, and I'm sure in yours. But let's take a moment to ruminate, and we'll come back in less than a minute. Evan, this is Evan Weber. He's with the USClimatePlan.org. It's a climate change think tank in Washington, in the Beltway. And he's thinking about and writing reports about the connection between energy and climate change. We'll be right back after this break.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Okay, we're here. ThinkTech Talks. Welcome back. We're being global today. We're talking with Evan L. Weber. That's Lewis, I think, right?
Yes.
He's with the USClimatePlan.org in the Beltway, and he joins us today by Skype. Wondrous, wondrous Skype. We're doing Skype all around the world every day. We have a map here in our studios with little red dots for all the Skype connections we make, and it's getting very dotted with red. Anyway, so I wanted to ask you in this part of the show, Evan, what about U.S. Climate Plan? Because you have to judge the message by the messenger, by the composer, the writer, if you will. What is this organization? How long has it lasted? Who has founded it, and so forth?
Sure. So yeah, we're really a brand new initiative. We really came to be in May and really got going in June. Basically, like I was saying earlier in the program, we got together out of the realization that our country had no comprehensive energy strategy whatsoever. And as a developed country, supposedly the world's premier superpower in political and economic, military, you name it, force, we thought that was really quite a shocking and problematic thing. And we, as a small contingency, wanted to see what sort of impact we could have on it. Particularly, we were concerned about the threat of climate change and the other sorts of energy issues that we're dealing with. And so, yeah, we came to be in June, right when President Obama had released his climate action plan, which was a sort of a threefold set of things that his administration was going to do on domestic climate mitigation, adaptation, and international leadership. And from there, we started writing this report to kind of take a look at what he had put forward and how it was good, and moreover, how it sort of fell short from what we saw as being necessary. So we are a completely independent organization. Right now, the core team is a team of three of us. It's myself, my colleague Matt Lichtash, and Dr. Michael Dorsey.
What are your collective or individual credentials that bring you to comment on the president's report and propose, improvements to it? What's the training? What's the experience in the group?
Sure. Well, we all have backgrounds in environmental issues. Specifically, myself, I have degrees in economics and environmental studies. And so that's sort of my academic training. But in terms of my experience, I've worked with HECO back in Hawaii for a little bit. I've worked with environmental nonprofits. I worked on green building, all sorts of different things, sustainability initiatives, things like that.
You grew up in Hawaii, no?
Yes, I'm from Hawaii.
So you may be in the Beltway writing national reports, but you're still a Hawaii son. And that's important because ultimately in this program, we want to try to get your expertise to look at the Hawaii situation as well in the same kind of analysis. What about your colleagues? What's their background?
My colleague, Matt Lichtash, he similarly has backgrounds in economics and environmental studies. And in terms of his experience, he's done environmental consulting, carbon tracking, analysis, and those types of things. So a little bit more of a data guy, looking at how data affects these issues. And then lastly, Dr. Michael Dorsey has significantly more experience than myself. He is in dealing in international and national climate politics for a while now. He's been heavily involved in international negotiations around climate change. He just got back from the negotiations in Warsaw last week.
Negotiations for what?
The UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is the international body that has been working for a couple decades now to try and come up with an international treaty on how to climate change.
Well, that would be a global plan or a United Nations plan, and maybe the same kinds of issues exist at that level as they do in the country and certainly in Hawaii. So you guys are trying to operate on the global level as well, eh?
Yeah, definitely things that we're pushing for and working on are definitely scalable in both directions, which is important. But other than that, he actually worked on the president's campaign, advising for energy and environment issues. He's worked directly with the Council for Environmental Quality of the president's office. Served on the board of the Sierra Club. Worked in environmental justice issues for a very long time. So more than myself, he's very experienced and very involved in working on these issues for some time.
So what's the process by which you write a report among the three? Is there a leader? Is Dr. Michael Dorsey the leader of the group, or do you operate as a kind of a democratic troika where everybody is even equal stature? How do you actually proceed to make the investigation, to do the research, to get the data, and then to write a report?
Sure. Well, yeah, we all sort of have our different strengths, and so we sort of divided up the kind of types of research based on what we're most familiar with. So myself, for example, I have a lot of academic background in dealing with environmental taxation, so I did a lot of the work on those types of issues, looking at incentives, subsidies, our greenhouse gas fee. The political background, looking at things like a presidential commission, connections to administrative initiatives, things like that, and the good data work of trying to figure out reductions we could get from certain policies at certain levels. So we really try to, in any team, play to each other's strengths, see where we can help each other out, things like that. So
Okay. So then now you make findings and conclusions and recommendations and so forth. How do you reach that? Do you reach it by a consensus model, or is it a vote? How do you actually finalize the substantive, conceptual statements in the report?
This is pretty much consensus based. We try to trust each other's judgment as much as possible. Go back and forth, work that each other have done, put it together. Like the one that we wrote, I can't even begin to explain how many hours, how many times we had to all individually review it over and over again. So it is a consensus process, but we, even things that you don't write yourself, you basically end up writing in some ways because of all the editing that goes on.
Sure, and at the end of the day, you're really all signing at the bottom line, and it's the work of all of you, so you're all responsible for every word in it. Sorry, that's the way it is. Anyway, you sound like a great experience. Did you have a lot of meetings, or is this being done, by email and media of one kind or another, rather than sitting at a table and hammering it out in person?
A little bit of both. So we started our initiative, like I said, in the summer, and for that time we were primarily all together, sort of working in offices daily, so going back and forth about things. Then we would, you know, sometimes have meetings where we would discuss things more bigger picture, and then go back and keep writing, researching. But since the writing phase, it's kind of evolved into more of a fluid initiative where we're all, you know, we are oriented around DC still, but all kind of hopping around, pushing, doing advocacy, reaching out to people in different areas. So it is a little bit more remote and fluid now to say.
Well, you've had the experience together. Now you're a well-oiled machine. Now you can write another report, and I'll be asking you about that in a few minutes. But I just wonder. I mean, do you go out and hire other people as contractors to provide information and get data? What's the level of intensity of research that you need to do in order to solidify your conclusions and recommendations?
Sure. Well, we try to rely on our connections and what we're able to get from people within our community as much as possible. So rather than sort of contracting out our work, we reached out to a lot of people who had expertise in certain areas, looked for them to review our work, and also point us in directions where we might be able to find the right data that we were looking for, the right types of analyses that we needed to sort of come to the right conclusions. So not really a contracting, but really working with people within many different circles, policy, academic, industry, all sorts of experts in various fields that help us create the content and also review the content for accuracy and quality.
I suppose you give them credit, but what about footnotes? Is this a kind of report that's laden with footnotes about the sources, and the substantiation for the statements you're making?
Sure. Footnotes for every sort of thing that footnote.
Oh, that's so tedious. But that's what you've got to do. And my question, which we'll take up after the break, is exactly what import does this report have vis-a-vis, for example, the White House, vis-a-vis other organizations that might be interested, or that might be, the kinds of organizations you would like to act on the report, such as, for example, the United Nations. Or other government agencies that could use the report to, prepare sub-plans or modify their existing plan. So I want to ask you about that right after the break. We're going to take one more break now. This is ThinkTech Talks, going global with Evan Weber, who is with the usclimateplan.org in Washington, D.C. That organization, as you have been listening, has just written a report on climate change and energy, and we'll be discussing more of it and it's the reaction of the community to it right after this short break. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. ThinkTech is a 501c3 Hawaii nonprofit corporation. We began ThinkTech in the year 2000. At ThinkTech, we work to raise public awareness about tech, energy diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. We do 20 live stream talk shows every business day, and we do a weekly TV show on OC16. We pay the bills with donations from our supporters. Won't you help us by making a donation? All you need to do is go to our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and click there on the Donate button. We hope that you like what we do and that you will support us and help us continue to do it. Thanks so much for watching and for helping. I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. Mahalo. We're back. We're live. Welcome back to ThinkTech Talks, going global with Evan L. Weber, who is a member of the group that wrote a report on climate change and energy. commenting on and making suggestions about the president's report of last summer. He's with usclimateplan.org and joins us by Skype from Washington, D.C., where his organization operates. So, Evan, what effect did you expect from the plan, rather the report you wrote? And what effect have you had? What kind of feedback have you gotten?
Well, as I said, we just really began everything in June. So I wouldn't say that we were expecting to change the world or even the state of U.S. energy policy.
Why not? Anyway, okay, so what happened? I mean, you submitted it. And through what channels did you submit it? Did you send a copy to the White House? Did you send it to the newspapers, to other organizations? And what happened after you did that?
So we released our report in October, and we sent it out with a big press release and reached out to the colleagues who we had worked with, sort of writing and reviewing the report and their networks and all of that. And basically, after the report came out, we had an action plan and are still executing our action plan of how we're going to make or have any impact. The first stage of that really was media outreach and engagement. And so we got a number of media hits off of it, talking on various radio shows across the country, getting a little bit of print coverage. Most notably, we got an op-ed about some of the legislative initiatives that we propose in the U.S. News and World Report. Since then we've been continuing to engage with the media around different things, trying to promote our policies as alternative strategies and solutions to what's on the table right now.
Well, the lesson seems to be, and I think your whole experience is a valuable laboratory for anyone interested in trying to have an effect on this issue. And there is a vacuum for the lack of a plan on federal and state levels, and to some extent on global levels as well. You've moved into that space, and it's an encouragement to us all. And I guess what comes to my mind is that you not only have to write the report, but you have to sell the report, and you have to sell your organization. You have to advocate the points of the report, and you have to educate the press and everyone where it came from and how important it is and so forth. So it's like making a movie. You can't just make the movie in a vacuum. You've got to go out there and advertise the movie. Have you been actively engaged in that personally yourself?
Yes. So, like I said, we've been engaging with the media, speaking with the media about what we've been doing, and myself included. I'm talking with you right now. And, other than that, attending, large conferences, speaking at events, reaching out to other groups that are working on similar issues and trying to see how we can work together, showing them what we've done, and sort of building initiatives and campaigns around real, advocacy for these issues. Because it's one thing to write a report, but we wrote the report because we wanted to really change the state of play, and so we're going out through a number of different means to try and make that happen.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old adage, or the old question: Does a report make noise if it falls alone in the forest? Anyway, so did the White House respond? Have you had engagement with, say, federal agencies charged with clean energy? Have you had official response as a result of this report? Good
question. We're not at that phase yet. Right now, we're kind of wrapping up our media engagement phase, which we sort of viewed as important before moving forward with direct engagement with the White House and Capitol Hill, because as an organization, we find it's really important that we kind of prove ourselves, build a little bit of clout, reach out to others who've been around doing this for a while, and show that our ideas and our policies, have and should be listened to.
Yeah, well, that's great. It's a great approach. Actually, you got to sort of show them who you are. But then you talked about a sort of an execution phase, where you took your report and you tried to get your recommendations executed.
Yes.
So is that the next phase, and how will you accomplish that phase?
Yeah. So now we're jumping into that phase now, and right now we're talking with a number of different parties about approaching the White House, either through a number of different avenues, through the Council of Environmental Quality, through the EPA, and trying to do that with a coalition of other groups that support similar ideas, and trying to do it in a piecemeal way in some circumstances, because not everything is going to be completely taken at face value the first time that we bring it in. We're also planning legislative briefings for the House. Particularly, we have one on the docket for the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, and we're working on getting that set up, hopefully sometime at the beginning of the new year.
This takes time. It takes money. There are 3 professionals involved with an investment of their training at least. How do you fund these activities? Do you have sponsors and underwriters that make it possible?
Yeah. So at first, we were operating off of some research grant funding for the phase where we were writing the report, and that actually came from my college alma mater, Wesleyan University, which is where this initiative was sort of born, which is kind of an interesting story. We were kind of shopping around for different grants, and ended up pursuing a crowdfunding model, and engaged in a crowdfunding campaign that ended up being very successful. We reached our goal within 45 days.
Wow.
That helped us kind of legitimize proof of concept for what we were doing, showing that there was interest in the ideas that we were putting out there, and narrative of solutions to the climate and energy crises that we're facing existing.
Well, will you change your report going forward, Evan? I mean, these things are dynamic, as you mentioned, for example, in connection with nuclear energy. Who knows, maybe there'll be new technology that will make you feel differently about it going forward. And that, I guess, applies for all kinds of renewable energy, all kinds of energy. So will you issue an addendum? Will you modify it? Will you write a supplemental report to account for changes like that?
Yeah, well, for most of what we put forward, a lot of it is the actual policies that we want to see put in place to keep track of and the principles of sound energy strategy, abating climate change as the foremost goals. And so, if technologies change, a lot of our policies will. More than that, we are hoping to expand our initial report into a more comprehensive document in the foreseeable future that kind of goes more into the nitty-gritty of what policies would actually look like across the country, what their economic impact would be, and things like that. And we'd be able to use that in a way that will bolster our stance further. So there definitely will be updates issued, but again, we are really focusing on the advocacy and trying to have an impact with what we've proposed.
Okay, that's Evan Weber. He joins us by Skype from Washington. He's with the usclimateplan.org. They've written a report on climate change and clean energy, which is really important, to try to develop a plan, a national plan on these issues. Released it in October. We're talking about what effect it may have. And in the next part of our show, I'll be asking Evan about what effect it should have in Hawaii and what Hawaii can learn by his efforts in Washington. We'll be right back after this break. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech Hawaii, broadcasting live from the Pioneer Plaza in downtown Honolulu. We raise public awareness about tech, energy, and globalism in Hawaii. Technology is critical to our state. A vibrant tech sector will give us new prospects in the global marketplace and will offer great careers and make our economy more resilient. Streaming live on Ustream and Spreaker, ThinkTech allows its hosts and guests invaluable opportunities to report important events and discuss important questions, and to be heard here in Hawaii and around the world. You can find links to our live streams on thinktechhawaii.com or on our mobile website, m.thinktechhawaii.com. And you can see our archive on YouTube. It's all just a click away. We want to do whatever we can to keep Hawaii relevant, connected, and thriving in the complexity of the 21st century. We hope you will help us in those efforts. Tune in today. This is ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. Mahalo. We're back. We're live. We're ThinkTech Talks going global with Evan L. Weber, who is with usclimateplan.org in Washington, D.C., which is a think tank organization established not too long ago to look into the connection of clean energy and climate change and make recommendations to the federal government on what can be done beyond what the president has already suggested. And Evan, since you're a local boy, come from Hawaii, go to school in Hawaii, have family and friends in Hawaii, you must be thinking about what Hawaii has done or not done, and planned or not planned as you watch the federal issues unfold. And I'm wondering what your thoughts have been, over the past, few months anyway, or longer, on what you have learned and how that could be applied and help Hawaii in its process.
But yeah, Jay, in a lot of ways, Hawaii really has been a leader on a lot of these issues, and does have a very transformative vision for the future ahead of a lot of places in the rest of the country. Our indigenous clean energy, which we have a lot of potential for. In a lot of ways, we can be going a lot further, and as always, politics is slowing things up. I think Hawaii is a really, really interesting case where we do have all of these sort of renewable energy resources at our a lot of places in the U.S. don't. We also have the desperate need in a lot of ways to move forward boldly for energy strategy. Because we are so dependent on imported foreign oil, we're the only state that uses a significant amount of oil in electricity generation still. It's considered barbaric in the rest of the U.S. For electricity generation. We're also very much at risk for a lot of the harmful effects of climate change. Sea level rise is going to have a big impact on Honolulu and Oahu. Ocean acidification is really posing great threats to our marine economy, and our agriculture starts to suffer as well. So we really have to act boldly.
You mentioned that in the original report, in the report you wrote, one of the recommendations, the points of concern was transportation on a national level. And that, in fact, in terms of clean energy, we really hadn't done too much about transportation. What exactly have you suggested? And would that apply in Hawaii as well, which also hasn't done very much on clean energy and transportation?
Yeah, well, I think we all know the transportation issue in Hawaii, especially is pretty complicated. There's this big rail project that's being built is clean transportation. No one really knows if it's going to be or not. For a system, but in the last few years, that's sort of been slipping a lot. Hawaii is a tricky situation, but we're also being targeted by companies for electric cars, for solar PV electric car charging stations. So we do have a lot of potential to move forward in terms of transportation. One thing that I think that Hawaii has been really revolutionary in has been solar financing and that have rolled out in the last couple of years there. And one thing that in our plan that I'd really like to see take root in Hawaii is a national green bank. And I'd like to see that on a state level in Hawaii. It's right now in Connecticut and New York, as well as other countries like the UK, Australia. And basically, it's a one-time pot of money that comes out from the budget and then is used to fund and finance loans for clean energy initiatives, and then leverage private capital to kind of make those make that fund multiply. And it ends up being something that doesn't end up costing the taxpayers because it ends up paying for itself and serve as an autonomous private-public partnership. And I think would really do a lot to further the rate of adoption of clean energy in Hawaii.
Evan, I wanted to just ask you one more question about your own plan, your own career plan. What you did is you created a think tank, which not many people do that coming out of school. That's quite an achievement all by itself. And you found companions to do it with you, and then you take a very ambitious and lofty view of how to express yourself, which I think is very admirable, as I've said. The question is this a career for you, or will it change? What do people in think tanks do these days? Do they stay in the same think tank? Will you move to another think tank? Will you come back to Hawaii and organize? This is more of a hope. Will you come back to Hawaii and organize a think tank here? We need you. What's your plan?
Well, I'll tell you what, Jay. The reason that I'm involved in this work right now, working on climate issues, is because of my upbringing in Hawaii. And growing up in Hawaii, you really you learn these things about how humans interact with the environment and how the environment is so important for our existence in so many ways. And so I guess to answer your question, I am invested in working on climate and energy issues for the long run. Not because it's something that I think is important for the world, but because I think it's really important for Hawaii. And so, eventually I would like to come back home and try to do whatever I think is best at the time there. But right now, it's a really great opportunity in front of me to try and have an impact here inside of the Beltway and really make a move in the capital, which can, I think, have a big impact. So
that's great. Well, our best wishes for you in all directions, Evan. When you've solved the problem at the national and global levels, you can come back here and help us finish the work. That's Evan L. Weber, a member of the USClimatePlan.org, which wrote a report on clean energy and climate change, which was released in Washington in October, and which is presumably on the website of USClimatePlan.org. Am I right, Evan?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much for joining us. When you come back, I'd like to do a studio visit with you. I hope you'll be back soon. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Jay.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank